Thank you everyone for joining me in today's webinar, Figuring Out Fundraising. My name is Maria and I will be hosting today's training session. Before I go ahead and get started on today's training, I do want to go ahead and provide a brief disclaimer and say any data represented in today's webinar is not real. It is sample data that it has been made up to properly provide examples on how to enter data into your data bank, your CRM system, and or be able to have a better understanding of how things would be displayed when you log in into your data bank. So I want to go ahead and provide that brief disclaimer before I go ahead and get started on today's training, where we are going back to the basics on how to figure out fundraising and understand the very fundamentals of it. So we do have a few learning objectives for today, and those are primarily going to consist of properly setting up a fundraising campaign, understand what a campaign is and what it tracks, and what kind of reporting you can do based on how you can set up a campaign itself. Additionally, I am going to show various ways that you can enter contributions and also how to process payments. And since we are talking about fundraising, if there is enough time, which hopefully there will be, we will go ahead and cover a few reports that are in the reports section that cover the fundraising aspect and um, are very important when we are talking about processing payments specifically. Briefly reminder before I do just dive in, if there are any questions after today's training or you're viewing this recording, feel free to put in a support request and submit an inquiry, and one of our tech representatives will get back to you in a timely manner. Otherwise, if you haven't done so already, feel free to sign up for any of our upcoming trainings. So again, this is a part one out of a two-part sessions of the fundraising module training. I believe our next training, we're going to be going more in depth about fundraising reports and diving into those specifically. So feel free to do that if you haven't done so already. So if you are logged in, and hopefully, ideally, you already have permissions for the fundraising aspect of your data bank. If you don't, you may want to reach out to your administrator so they can grant you access for the fundraising tool. Sometimes that's all it really is, for them to just go to administrator users and update your permissions, or also put in a support request and we can help you out with that. Um, in essence, you're going to want to click on campaigns for today's training. And so for today's training, we're going to primarily be looking at this section. But before we either start looking at existing campaigns and also look at creating new campaigns within our data bank, I'm going to go ahead and provide a few background information on what a campaign is within the context of the data bank. So campaigns refer to any type of marketing initiative to solicit responses from contacts or prospect contacts of the data bank. So within a fundamental level, you have a campaign, and that's just a means of organizing, your data. So you have the set data, and then you structure that into campaigns. Then you are able to search for, whatever information you are looking for, and then you act on it, right? So you can send thank you letters or thank you emails / power mails, and or create reports based on your campaigns and so forth. So here I pulled up a campaign structure support article within our support center. So you can access this by clicking or copying or typing campaign structure in that search bar in our database support center. And so here's a brief image where we have a contribution hierarchy, right? So here we have our type, our campaign type. And then based on that campaign type, we have, say, several campaigns created. And then each campaign has segments attributed to its own designated campaign, and then a donation amount for that specific segment. So a better representation of that is this following example that we have here. So we have a campaign type called special events. So under the special events campaigns, we have the house parties campaigns, we have the baseball games, and then the award banquet campaign. So under this particular campaign, we have established various segments here. So we have table sales as one of the segments, program ads, individual gifts, silent auction as another segment. So therefore, when participants, attendees, attend this award banquet, then we can go ahead and say, okay, well, $100 were given for the individual gifts. And then another, say, $5,000 was made for the individual gifts. But under the silent auction, say someone made a donation of uh, $500,000 as a silent auction, right? So then you're going to be able to capture those dollar amounts pertaining to those various segments that you attribute for that particular campaign. So depending on how you want to go ahead and again report, search on your data, that's how you're going to be creating your campaign and segments. So here, if I go back to my data bank, I can take a look at various examples of campaigns that have been created. Again, this is going to represent real life examples of clients because this is a test database. But for example, if we have this online donations, again, depending on how you want to set it up, perhaps it would make sense for me to remove the year because what happens when we end up creating yearly campaigns and say we're not actively creating new campaigns every year, it's a possibility that your yearly donations or of your campaign aren't going to be segment as you've anticipated. So by generalizing this as online donations, and rather removing 2022, that would make the most sense. And then here we'll have auction purchases, monthly recurring donations, other donations, sponsorship donations, and ticket sales. Otherwise, we do know, there are other, clients that are very up to date with how they keep track their campaigns and segments. So yearly, they'll create their new campaigns per year and then update their existing forms because it's very important, that not only you create your campaigns, but you also go ahead and update any existing forms that may contain the previous year campaign. So one thing you also want to keep in mind, even if you don't like I say, put a year in your campaign name so that you're not segmenting by year on each campaign. You can always search and filter contributions based on a specific date. So it doesn't have to be the case where you think that by putting a year in the campaign name is the only correct way to do it, right? So can't say there is a right or wrong way, but it just really depends on uh the the routine, the set, way of how your organization wants to handle the process of, the campaign segments and how they're attributing to forms, right? So for example, here we have another campaign, another example. So we have donor level. That's just the campaign name. And then we have donors who gave over 500,000 or $500. And then we have another segment called donors who gave between 200 and 500. So perhaps, when we are attributing these segments to our forms, we're giving them the, you know, like the specific, context of, make your donation between 200 and 500. And so ideally when someone enters their dollar amount, it's that, between 200 and 500, and then you can establish, okay, well, six individuals made a donation between 200 and 500 and so forth. So again, there's no right or wrong way that you can establish these campaigns. There's various, methods, but it really just matters how your organization feels comfortable, and also how your organization is going to continue to keep up with, um, the campaigns. Because, of course, if you are containing it at a more generic level, then that also might just be more helpful. So here we have a membership level as well. And so we have a company membership, family membership, and individual membership. So that's just another, not all the time, if you're working towards a specific, say, event or gathering memberships for your organization, then this might be another way to keep track of how many memberships were purchased as of an individual membership, or on the contrary, how many memberships were purchased for family, and then, of course, getting that total amount for um, that specific segment, in this case, the membership levels. So now that we have a understanding idea of what that looks like, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new campaign to demonstrate how and what fields mean what exactly. Before I do that, just want to provide a quick reference that in this particular screen, you can go ahead and sort of filter what you want to view on here. So if you just want to view campaigns that are currently active, you can click on that active arrow pointing down and click yes. And so it's only going to pull up campaigns that are currently active. Additionally, if you want to go ahead and resort based on campaign name, based on description, you can also click on it and it's going to go ahead and sort based on either ascending or descending level. And last but not least, you can also view your advocacy campaigns. So if that module is part of your data bank, you can click on this hyperlink here, hide advocacy campaigns. So again, that's just more related to that. But to create a brand new campaign, we're going to click on the plus icon or located on the top right corner. And so one thing to keep in mind here is that the only thing that's really required is the campaign number/code. So this is just going to be a unique identifiable uh, number code for this particular campaign. So it can be an abbreviation of what you are going to be creating. So for example, in this example, we can see, talk about our fundraising events. So fundraising event. I believe for the campaign number and code, there's a limit of 15 characters and no spacing is allowed. But for example, when you talk about the campaign name and or the description, you can be a little bit more specific on what your specific campaign may be. So if you actually are using like numbers or abbreviations, then you can use the campaign name and or description section to elaborate a little bit further on what that is. So I'm just going to verify that I did go ahead and do that. So any of these other fields are completely optional. Again, to actually create the campaign, you'll really need the campaign number and code. But of course, the more information we put in for like the name and description and or type, that's going to be very helpful. So here we're going to go ahead and um, put in, so campaign name, fundraising events. And then we can say capturing fundraising event tiers. And then campaign type. So depending, like I said, on how you are going to be planning on segmenting your data, collecting data, you're going to want to go ahead and attribute a campaign type to this. So in this case, we can go ahead and say it's fundraising events. We can call it probably special events. And then, of course, if you don't see a list, then that's probably because you just are going to want to create a new list. And once you click submit, it's going to add it to your campaign type dropdowns. So I'm going to go ahead and put it here. If your data bank has suborgs, attributed to it, you're going to want to go ahead and select the corresponding organization that you want this campaign to belong to. And I'm currently logged in as a super administrator, which is why I'm having this particular option. But if I am currently, say, member or user from that sub org, it wouldn't provide me this option. So it would just mean that whatever campaign I create, it's going to be attributed to that sub org I'm already logged into. So in this case, I'll just go ahead and say Data Bank Essentials. It's currently active. Yes. And so, like I said, all of these other fields are completely optional. If you are going to say be starting this campaign that's going to be lasting, say, up until um, June 1st, you can certainly put in a close date to kind of remind you that, you're going to want to mark this campaign inactive in June 1st. But if it's something that's going to kind of keep on going, you can feel free to leave it blank. Any of these other fields, again, they're not going to impact the amount of funds that do come into the campaign, but allows you to kind of compare and contrast your initial kind of expectations versus the actual donations that happen for that specific campaign. So I'm going to go ahead and click submit. When we create a campaign, you are not done. So that is very important to understand. When you create a campaign, you are taken to this screen. And in order for your campaign to be successful and actually be processed, you're going to want to make sure that you enter at least one segment. So for example, here, I'm going to go ahead and see what I'm going to do. I can go ahead and say this is going to be the ticket sales. Um, Ticket sales. I believe the name also has a limit of 50 characters, but if anything, I think it's the segment code. So the segment code is also going to be automatically populated. And so in this case, it's fundraising events A. So it might not make sense to do that. We can just call it ticket sales and then just be one word. And then, of course, if you want to specify a little bit further what the segment means, if you are abbreviated, you can certainly do so. One thing you want to keep in mind for, these other things, it's more so if like quantity, I think it's if you want to like limit um, for how many you want to incorporate for that specific segment. But for the most part, we always just leave it blank. One thing that you also want to go ahead and do if you are working with like reoccurring donations is what the renewal period will be. So in this case, we're not going to be working with like reoccurring donations or any of that, so we're leaving it as blank. So the description field is required. So ticket sales, uh, again, it's going to be a little bit redundant. It usually works a little bit better if you are one planning on abbreviating certain things, and or going to elaborating a little bit more if there's a distinction between I'll say GA ticket sales versus platinum ticket sales, and then you can just go ahead and say, something different. But because in this case, I'm going to be going ahead and using different options, we're going to go ahead and say auction purchases. And then again, segment coaches automatically gets attributed based on the campaign name. But in this case, we're just going to go ahead and update it. And like I mentioned before, because these are not going to be reoccurring donations, the renewal period doesn't matter. We currently don't have any contributions made, which is left at zero. But if people had already been making sales, then it would have a quantity for how many contributions were made for that particular segment along with that dollar amount. So in essence, that is the essential part of just creating your campaign. There was a question, I believe, about elaborating the campaign number and codes. So depending on how your organization is planning on one starting, to create the campaigns or have already been creating the campaigns. I know a lot of the times, depending if there is an integration, say with another platform, perhaps QuickBooks, sometimes the campaign numbers code is a little bit referenced to that. And then the description is a little bit more elaborate on what that campaign is, right? So that's just an example. It doesn't mean that it has to be that way, right? But it's just a way to kind of keep things a little bit more, I wouldn't say streamlined, but they're, basically very similar across the various platforms that you may be, you know, using. So in this case, say we have this campaign number and code 400.001.252. Like I said, there are examples where clients are using, say, QuickBooks reference numbers, so they attribute that to that campaign number. This campaign number code can be something that's not numbers. It could literally be just an abbreviation of your campaign name. And so here we are going ahead and say, okay, this is the campaign name, and then this is the description for leadership year 2020, whatever, right? It has XX. If I go back, right, and if I click on the actual campaign number and code, clicking on it, I can go into the segments, the existing segments that's already been created, right? So earlier, I mentioned that usually the name is an abbreviation of either uh, like the description of that specific segment. And so this is probably a better example of how we can go ahead and establish those naming conventions, right? So here we have a campaign called Board Leadership. And so based on this first segment, we have board D, board direct gifts, right? And so this is the code associated to that particular segment. And then we have this additional segment called board S, board solicited. So this is going to be the second segment. So the way that you want to get familiarized with this is because when you are starting to create searches, and wanting to build your reports, that is going to be based on what you're going to be searching for. So if I wanted to look up anybody that had made a contribution for this particular campaign, I could select board leadership as the campaign that I'm looking for. But I could also look up donations for either of these specific segments. So, okay, I want to look at all the gifts that were made for the board direct gifts. And so that would prompt me with the individuals that have made the $100 contributions, whether it was one that did all three or if it was three individuals that did various donations amounts totaling to $100. So I hope that gives a little bit better insight on just kind of the importance of one, establishing, a naming convention for your campaigns that makes sense for your organization internally, and then also when you are building your reports. So I'm going to go back to the list. And so one thing that I want to go ahead and go over is the payments section. So when we have established our forms, when we've attributed segments to the forms that, are already embedded onto our website, um, most of the times, again, I can't speak for everybody because everyone may have different payment gateways. So the scenario is very different. Most of the times, you will still have to um, come here and click post and process selected payments. By clicking post, you pretty much make sure that that payment shows up within the contact record. So, for example, if I go to Thomas Doe and I see that there's the $25 check made for January 30th, 2025, I can see that there is no contribution in his contact record, right? So what does that mean? That means that even though Thomas Doe made that $25 check, it still doesn't show up in his contact record. In the example of the check payment, right? The first ideal step would be to ensure that one, your organization actually received that check before you actually post the payment. Because if you post a payment, I'm going to go ahead and do that now and click process, then it's going to show up in the contact record. So I'm going to go ahead and click refresh. And now it's going to show me, okay, that check payment is already there. So again, you want to do this, at least for the check example, you want to make sure that one, your organization actually has received that money that that person made the payment for before you process it. But when you are processing, say, credit card payments, usually if you have a payment gateway that's already processing these transactions as they come in, you'll see something that says authorization code 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9, 10, right? So that's just an example. But sometimes you'll still have to click on a like blue hyperlink that says submit to payment gateway, and like for example, submit to IATS for processing. So you click on that, and then the system will process it. And if it's okay, it'll kind of give you that reference code that is okay that it was processed. But if it was declined, whether um, the donor, didn't type in the correct address or there was something wrong going on with the card, it will give you that information. And therefore you won't be allowed to process. But for example, in this case, say this test card for this test donor, if I click post, it's going to go ahead and process and then post it into that contact record. So once it's posted and viewed in that contact record, then you are actually going to, when you pull your reports, it's going to show those information. So rule of thumb, whenever you are working, with your forms, the payments are going to be happening, once the form is on your website or you are sending it via power mail. But you're still going to want to come here to ensure that whether you are needing to process the payments for processing or actually posting them so they show up in your contact record. So that is one thing you want to make sure you keep in mind. And there's one additional question. So if the check wasn't received, but I've already posted the payment, what should I do? Good question. Yeah. So if the check was never received, but then you clicked, process or post for payment, very easy. We're just gonna go back to Thomas contact record and we can click edit. And then we would just want to make sure we click delete. So by deleting the contribution record, you're just removing, any sort of acknowledgement that the $25 funds were actually received. And then, of course, say we're deleting it, right? So that would be the first step. And then the next thing would be, okay, on 2-4, I'm creating an activity note that says it's in relation to their donation. For example, the activity done was done by me. And so here I'm just gonna do other and say $25 check donation was not received, and the payment was deleted or removed from the contact record, right? So that's just so we can have that information on our end and ensure, we have that record in our, in their contact record, and we can reference back at a future time. So $25 check was not received and the payment was deleted from contact record, right? And then we're just going to click submit. So that is one thing, right? But what happens if, you know, Thomas Doe decided that he did, he totally forgot about that $25 check that he said he was going to send. And so we got it, say, today. So we can go into Thomas Doe's contact record and we can click if it's a credit card information, um, and we want to go ahead and put it the payment, we can click on that icon. But say we did get the check, and then of course, checks and cash payments aren't something electronically that you need to process. So then you just click on the plus icon of a contact record, select your corresponding campaign that you want to attribute that donation amount. In this case, I'm just selecting membership level. I'm doing individual membership and say $25. This is a new payment method, check. And if we have the check number, in this case, 133,456, the date thank, if we've established and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and click submit. So we received that $25 check. We went ahead and added that contribution into their contact record. Now we want to go ahead and send them that receipt that we, have acknowledged that $25 contribution. We can click on this email or envelope icon, and it's going to prompt us to this particular page. And it's going to say, hey, Thomas Joe, thank you for your, this is a summary of your contribution. You can then edit any particular information here. And if there's anything you want to modify here, you want to go ahead and click send to actually send out that power mail. What is the difference between the plus icon and the credit card? So if we clicked on this credit card icon, this is where we would be then allowed to enter credit card information, ACH information, and so forth. So to do that, we're going to scroll to where it says payment information. And you do have the option to copy values from Thomas's previous payment. That's what you wanted. But in this case, we're starting again a new. And then here, say we chose credit, it's going to prompt us to select our corresponding payment gateway. Because this is a test database, there's no payment gateway for us to select. But as we scroll down, we can see that there's the credit card information section. Alternatively, if you select ACH, you can enter the bank routing info and the account info down below. Again, keep in mind that you still want to make sure you are selecting the corresponding campaign, corresponding segments, and or entering the contribution information. The one thing that I will say in regards to this is that even if you are entering the payment information through the data bank never stores payment information. That's why there's that sort of partnership with your payment gateway so that once that info gets sent to the payment gateway, that they can go ahead and handle and process all that on their end. Um, so those are the two methods to add payment informations to existing contact records within your data bank. But the last one that I just want to go ahead and go over is through the payments page. So if you have a contact record, say that gave your organization a phone call and they don't want to go ahead and fill out your form that's on your website and they would prefer for you to do it on your end, you can just go to the payments page and click add payment. And so you are going to want to enter their information, first, last, their address, email, of course, and then any other personal fields that you want to, incorporate while you are capturing their information. And then similar to when you are entering a payment within the contact record, you're going to go ahead and enter the payment information in this section. And once you've clicked submit, you're still going to want to go back to the payments and post and or submit for processing so that it actually shows up within a contact record. So these are the various ways to one, enter payments within existing contact records for new contact records, and also how to process payments within your data bank system. The one thing that I just briefly want to go over is that sometimes, say we do post payments, but they're not showing up in the contact record. So then there's that question of like, where is this payment? I submitted it and it got posted, but it's not showing up. The one place that you are going to want to look for is going to be under reports, contribution tab, and look at uh the orphaned reports. So I'm gonna go ahead, I think I scrolled past it, the orphan contribution report. So currently I don't have any, but sometimes if there are payments that didn't have a segment or campaign or have an invalid campaign or segment, that usually happens if a segment gets updated, but then the form didn't get updated. This is where you would find them, but that's just one thing I just wanted to point out, but we're going to be going over these a little bit more in depth on our next upcoming training. So thank you for joining me in today's training, and I hope this information was valuable for you.